Hello, sorry what listeners. I've got a story today about how husband took a revenge on wife without even doing anything. You gonna like it. I've received this story yesterday on my email. Also, if we hit 100 likes on this one, I'll open up about my own experience with betrayal and why I've started this channel. So, let's get into it, and I hope it resonates with some of you out there. My name is John. I remember the first time I met Lisa. It was at a small cafe near the university. The sun was shining, and she was reading a book, her hair catching the sunlight in a way that made her look almost ethereal. I mustered up the courage to approach her, and we started talking about the book she was reading. That simple conversation turned into hours of talking, laughing, and sharing stories. We dated for a few years before deciding to tie the knot. Our wedding was a simple affair, surrounded by close friends and family. We promised each other a lifetime of happiness, trust, and understanding. And for a long time, it felt like we were living in a dream. We bought a cozy house on the outskirts of the city, had two beautiful children, and both pursued careers we were passionate about. I worked as an architect, and Lisa was a schoolteacher. Our evenings were filled with family dinners, board games, and bedtime stories. Weekends were reserved for picnics, movie nights, or sometimes just lazy mornings in bed. We had our differences, of course. I loved jazz, while Lisa was more into classical music. She was an early riser, and I loved to sleep in. But these differences only added charm to our relationship. Our friends often said we were the perfect couple. And I believed them. I felt grateful every day for the life we had built together. The love, the trust, the shared dreams, it all seemed so perfect. But as the years went by, I started to notice small changes. She had a knack for gardening, and our yard was always awash with colors from the vibrant roses to the delicate daisies. But as the days turned into weeks, I noticed the garden starting to wither. The roses lost their bloom, and the daisies drooped sadly. One morning, as I sipped my coffee, I watched her through the kitchen window. She was in the garden, but instead of her usual enthusiastic pruning and planting, she just stood there, staring at the flowers, lost in thought. Her once lively hazel eyes looked tired and distant. The changes weren't just at home. We had a tradition of meeting for lunch every Wednesday at our favorite cafe near her school. It was our little midweek date, a way to break the routine. But she started canceling those, often at the last minute. Something came up, she'd text, or got caught up with work. One Wednesday, I decided to surprise her with lunch. I got her favorite, a turkey and avocado sandwich with a side of coleslaw. As I approached the school, I saw her sitting on a bench with a colleague, engrossed in conversation. It was a man I recognized but couldn't place. They seemed close. Too close. I retreated before she could see me, the sandwich feeling heavy in my hand. Our evenings, once filled with laughter and shared stories of our day, became silent. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, she engrossed in her phone, and me lost in my thoughts. The kids noticed too. Our youngest, Sarah, once asked, "Daddy, why doesn't mommy talk much anymore?" I tried to reassure her, "She's just tired from work, sweetie." One evening, as the sun cast a golden hue over our living room, I decided to confront the growing chasm between us. I sat next to her, taking her hand in mine. It felt cold. "Lisa," I began, my voice gentle, "I've noticed you've been distant. Is there something you're not telling me?" She looked up, her eyes searching mine, as if weighing whether to confide in me. After what felt like an eternity, she sighed, "It's just work stress, John. I promise." But her promise felt empty, and the walls between us grew higher. The house that once echoed with joy now whispered secrets in hushed tones. The garden that bloomed with love now wilted with neglect. And the relationship that was built on trust now teetered on the edge of doubt. The corporate parties were never really my thing. They were often loud, filled with forced laughter and small talk. But this year, I felt a need to escape the silence of our home, even if just for a few hours. The venue was a posh hotel downtown, with golden chandeliers and a live jazz band playing softly in the background. As I made my way through the crowd, nodding and exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, I spotted Emily. We had worked on a few projects together and shared a mutual respect for each other's work. She was standing by the bar, her blue dress complementing her auburn hair, which cascaded down her shoulders. "Hey, John," she greeted with a warm smile, "fancy seeing you here. You usually skip these events." I chuckled, needed a change of scenery. We started talking, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. She spoke about a recent trip to Greece, and I shared stories of the kids. As the night wore on, I found myself opening up to her about the growing distance between Lisa and me. She listened intently, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "John," she began, choosing her words carefully, "relationships have their ups and downs. Maybe Lisa is just going through a phase." I sighed. "It's been months, Emily. I feel like I'm losing her." She placed a comforting hand on my arm. "Have you tried talking to her? Really talking?" "I have," I replied, my voice heavy with emotion, "but it feels like she's hiding something." Emily looked deep into my eyes. "Whatever happens, John, remember you're not alone. You have friends who care about you." As the night came to an end, we exchanged numbers, promising to catch up more often. Over the next few weeks, Emily became a pillar of support. We'd meet for coffee, go for walks, and she'd often check in with texts, asking how I was holding up. One evening, after a particularly tough day, we met at a small cafe. As we sat across from each other, she reached out, holding my hand. "John, I'm here for you. Whatever you need." I looked into her eyes, seeing the genuine care and concern. For a moment, I felt a pull, a desire to seek comfort in her embrace. But I pulled away gently. "Thank you, Emily. But I need to figure things out with Lisa. I owe it to our years together." Emily nodded, understandingly. "Of course, John. Just remember, it's okay to seek support when you need it." And while my heart was heavy with the weight of my crumbling marriage, I took solace in the fact that there were still people who cared, who stood by me, even in the toughest of times. The days grew colder, both in weather and in the atmosphere of our home. One afternoon, after dropping the kids off at a playdate, I decided to surprise Lisa at her school. I thought maybe a spontaneous lunch could rekindle some of the warmth we once shared. As I approached the school, I noticed a familiar car parked outside. It was Mark's. Mark and I went way back to our university days. We lost touch after graduation, and it was only recently that I learned he had started working at the same school as Lisa. Curiosity piqued, I walked towards the school's garden area, a place Lisa often mentioned as her sanctuary during breaks. And there they were. Lisa and Mark, seated on a bench, deep in conversation. Their body language was intimate, closer than what you'd expect from mere colleagues. I hid behind a tree, trying to catch snippets of their conversation. "Lisa," Mark began, his voice soft, "I know this is complicated, but I can't help how I feel." Lisa looked down, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her dress. "Mark, I'm married. We can't." Mark interrupted, "I know, but ever since we reconnected, there's been this connection. Can you honestly say you don't feel it too?" Lisa hesitated, then whispered, "It's not that simple. There's John, the kids." Mark reached out, gently lifting her chin. "I'm not asking you to decide anything now. Just think about it." I felt a knot in my stomach, the weight of their words pressing down on me. I retreated quietly, my mind racing. The pieces started to fall into place: the late nights, the secretive texts, the growing distance. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what I had just witnessed. The pain of betrayal was sharp, made even more so by the fact that it was not just my wife, but also an old friend. That evening, as I sat in our living room, I remembered the notification I had seen on Lisa's phone a few days ago. It was from GPT. On a hunch, I picked up her phone when she was in the shower. I opened the chat and there it was, a conversation where she asked for advice on how to handle feelings for someone else, how to hide an affair. The reality of it all hit me hard. The woman I had spent years building a life with was drifting away, and I felt powerless to stop it. Kindly remind you to drop a like, and let's continue. The house was quiet when I returned, the only sound being the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I found Lisa in the kitchen, making tea. The steam from the kettle rose in slow spirals, mirroring the tension in the room. Taking a deep breath, I began, "Lisa, we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I could see a hint of fear in them. "What's wrong, John?" I paused, searching for the right words. "I went to your school today. I saw you with Mark." Her face paled, and she looked down, avoiding my gaze. "John, I held up a hand, stopping her. "I also saw your chat with ChatGPT. Lisa, how could you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It just did. I'm so sorry, John." We sat down, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. "Why, Lisa? Why Mark? Why did you hide it? She took a shaky breath. I felt lost, John. The routine, the monotony, it all became too much. Mark, he was just there. He listened, he understood. It was a mistake. I felt a mix of anger, pain, and betrayal. But why hide it? Why not talk to me? She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I was scared. Scared of losing you, our family. I thought I could handle it, end it before it went too far. But I was wrong. We sat in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us. Lisa, I finally said, my voice breaking, I don't know if I can move past this. She sobbed, I understand, John. I'm so sorry. The next few days were a blur. We decided to take a break, to give each other space to think and heal. I moved into a small apartment downtown, while Lisa stayed in the house with the kids. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, but more than that, it was the loss of trust that hurt the most. The foundation of our relationship had been shaken, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. A few days after the confrontation with Lisa, I found myself driving to a familiar place, the old pub where Mark and I used to hang out during our university days. It was a rustic place, with wooden beams and dim lighting, a stark contrast to the modern bars downtown. I had called Mark earlier, asking to meet. He sounded surprised but agreed. As I entered, I spotted him at our old spot, a corner booth by the window. He looked older, the lines on his face more pronounced, but his eyes still held that familiar spark. I took a deep breath and approached him. Mark. He looked up, his expression unreadable. John. It's been a while. I nodded, taking the seat opposite him. Let's cut to the chase. Why, Mark? Of all the people, why with Lisa? Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't planned, John. It just happened. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. That's not an answer, Mark. We were friends. Brothers. How could you betray me like this? Mark looked away, guilt evident in his eyes. I've always envied you, John. Your success, your family, everything. When I reconnected with Lisa, it was like a window into the life I never had. And one thing led to another. I shook my head in disbelief. So you used Lisa to get back at me? To fill some void in your life? Mark hesitated, then whispered, it wasn't just that. I genuinely fell for her. But yes, part of it was the envy, the desire to have what you had. The weight of his confession hung in the air. I felt a mix of anger, pity, and sadness. You've lost your way, Mark. And in the process, you've destroyed 2 families. Mark looked down, tears in his eyes. I know, John. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We sat in silence, the memories of our friendship overshadowed by the pain of betrayal. After what felt like hours, I stood up. Goodbye, Mark. I hope you find what you're looking for. As I walked away, I realized that while the pain was still raw, confronting Mark had given me a sense of closure. It was time to move on and rebuild my life. The days following the confrontation with Mark were a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss consumed me. The city, with its bustling streets and towering skyscrapers, felt suffocating. I moved into a new apartment, closer to the kids' school. It was a modern space with large windows that let in plenty of sunlight. The first morning, as I sipped my coffee, looking out at the city skyline, there was a knock on the door. It was Emily, holding a potted plant. Housewarming gift, she said with a smile, handing it to me. It's a peace lily. Thought it was fitting. I chuckled, placing the plant on the windowsill. Thanks, Emily. It's perfect. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I grew closer. Our bond, forged in the fires of pain and betrayal, was now strengthened by shared dreams and hopes for the future. We'd often meet for coffee, go for long walks in the park, or simply sit on my balcony, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset, Emily turned to me. John, have you thought about what's next? For you, for us? I took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About Lisa, the kids, and my future. And while the pain still lingers, I've realized that I can't let it define me. As for us, I said, looking into her eyes, I think we have something special. And I'd like to see where it goes. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with tears. I feel the same way, John. Life is too short to live in the past. We have to embrace the present and look forward to the future. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emily and I started building a life together. We introduced each other to our families, went on trips, and even talked about moving in together. The kids adored her, and she became a constant loving presence in their lives. One day, as we sat in our favorite cafe, Emily looked up from her book. "John, I've been thinking. How about we take a trip? Just the two of us. Somewhere we've never been." I smiled. "Sounds perfect. Anywhere in mind?" She grinned. "How about Greece? I've always wanted to see the sunsets in Santorini." I laughed. "Greece it is." As we planned our trip, I realized that life, with all its ups and downs, was a journey. And while there were moments of pain and betrayal, there were also moments of love, joy, and new beginnings. With Emily by my side, I was ready to embrace the next chapter, grateful for the second chance at love and happiness. Update. 2 years later. As I sat on our balcony, a warm cup of coffee in hand, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns life had taken in the past 2 years. The city below was waking up, its rhythm familiar and comforting. Next to me, Emily was engrossed in a book, her face illuminated by the soft morning light. Every now and then, she'd look up, our eyes meeting, and we'd share a silent moment of gratitude. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this peace, this contentment. The pain of Lisa's betrayal and the shock of Mark's involvement had left deep scars. But time, they say, heals. And with Emily by my side, the healing had been a journey of rediscovery. Emily and I had taken things slow, building our relationship on a foundation of trust, understanding, and shared dreams. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and most importantly, we communicated about our fears, our hopes, and our love for each other. My kids adored her, and she had seamlessly become a part of our lives, filling our days with laughter and warmth. As for Lisa and Mark, their relationship hadn't lasted. The guilt and the weight of their actions had driven a wedge between them. Last I heard, Lisa was seeking therapy, trying to find her way back to herself. Mark had moved to another city, perhaps in search of a fresh start. I harbored no ill feelings towards them. Life was too short for grudges, and I had found my happiness. One evening, as Emily and I walked in the park, hand in hand, she turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "John, do you ever wonder about the what-ifs?" I thought for a moment, then replied, "Sometimes. But then I look at where we are now, and I realize that every twist, every turn, led me to you. And I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, leaning into me. "Neither would I." And as the sun set, casting a golden glow over our path, I realized that life's journey wasn't about the destinations, but the journey itself. And with Emily by my side, I was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Thank you for listening, brothers. Your support is very important to keep my channel alive. Hope I will see you soon on my other videos. Cheers.